We really okay. Back to our books of the year. We've selected 10 favorite books, music-related books of the year, and we're going through them one at a time. And this time, we're talking about the life and times of Malcolm McLaren, which is the biography of Malcolm McLaren, written by Paul Gorman. I don't know about you, Mark, but I think we know Paul a bit. And Paul is the ideal person to have written this book. I can't think of anybody better qualified, because Malcolm McLaren's life touches on so many different worlds.
Huge variety.
And it would have been a great shame if it had just been written by a straight music writer who would have recognized all the kind of music references.
Yeah, and all of it punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the great thing about Paul is, he's really grounded in the worlds that McLaren kind of touched on, or more than touched on, the worlds of fashion, the worlds of art, the world of Hollywood and all that kind of thing. And there's just an absolutely extraordinary range of characters who passed through this book. I was just refreshing my memory earlier today, and I realized I really ought to read a biography of the tea magnate Sir Thomas Lipton, who turns up in this as one of the people who apparently availed himself of the sexual services of Malcolm McLaren's mother.
Yeah, that's right.
His home life is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it, Malcolm McLaren?
Oh, well, I mean, he was abandoned by his mum, wasn't he? And then pretty much brought up by his gran. And his gran told him to be bad is good because to be good is simply boring, which I think was something he took on board pretty seriously, didn't he?
And his mother clearly was kind of she provided sexual services, I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely right.
And she used to take him along to hotels, and he would sit down there in reception while she provided sexual services to very
That's
often
right.
Well-connected, very
Came
wealthy.
back down again, straightening her clothes,
It's absolutely extraordinary. And the whole story of him and Vivienne Westwood and the strange life that they led. I mean, the staying power of these people, because they went through long periods of, penury and obscurity, didn't they? Westwood clearly has just absolutely remarkable drive.
Incredible drive. And that's an interesting relationship, isn't it? It's a bit like John and Yoko. She's 5 years older than him. And clearly a kind of mother figure who kind of runs and controls his life to some extent. And he's interesting too, because I think he's a real throwback to those kind of Larry Parnes impresarios of the 1950s, don't you think? Kind of showbiz hustlers who control every aspect of the creativity of the suggestible stars they control.
Well, that's his whole kind of career is spent looking for people who can make the things happen that he wants to happen.
Precisely,
and
very he can mold.
And very often he's not quite sure how to make those things happen. But I suppose he has what would be referred to in the world of fashion as an eye.
Yeah.
Which is when he sees it, he thinks, no, that could work. You know what I mean? Which is something he carried through way beyond the Sex Pistols, the things like, double Dutch and hip hop and all that kind of stuff, and his interest in township music from Africa and all this kind of stuff. I was fascinated by the putting together of the Sex Pistols, which kind of starts with, well, there's got Matlock, Cook and Jones, and he's just looking for somebody else, and he clearly hasn't any idea what sort of other person he's looking for. Because he tries absolutely everybody in this position, doesn't he? Nick Kent has tried
the enemy, I know.
Nick Kent, Midge-Ure, of Slick is tried as one. And, he even wants Sylvain Sylvain of the New York Dolls to come over and kind of front the group. So he clearly didn't have a very clear idea until Johnny Rotten just arrived. And I think it was a combination of John and the word rotten that kind of just worked for him.
And he becomes fixated with it, doesn't he, really? He thinks, this is it, I'll build a group around him.
Yeah. And
he's brilliantly described by Fred Vermorel, his old art school pal, as having the vision of an artist, the heart of an anarchist, and the imagination of a spiv. So you have all those elements going on. It's fantastic.
That's very good. And I just want to read a bit, actually, and about, after he'd the Sex Pistols had their kind of their time with the EMI and their very brief time with A&M, and he'd managed to somehow bank quite a lot of money. Well, what seemed a lot of money at the time. It grossed £125,000 in non-returnable record company monies, and he was still paying. He was still playing Sex Pistols £30 a week, but in classic kind of fashion. This is how the Small Faces and all these groups ended up with no money. Oh, don't worry, I'll find you a flat. I'll find you somewhere to live. I'll take care of all that.
They tend to look after the day-to-day, the immediate things.
Absolutely.
As long as you've got 25 quid in cash you can spend on beer, you think this is great.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about the future.
It's only 10 years later when they go, how much money have I got? And but then he finds his way to then they talk about the arrival of the Sid Vicious situation is already getting out of control due to the arrival of Nancy Spungen, who's described very well here as needy and wheedling. Which I think is very good. In her bad influence over the suggestible Vicious lay the seeds of not only the couple's destruction, but also the group's dissolution. Another flashpoint was the lack of live promotion, in part caused by the hit the reputation had taken them on promoters, but exacerbated by McLaren's adoption of a policy of maintaining the group's unavailability as a way of adding to their mystique. Jeff Dexter, the veteran DJ, recalls a meeting with McLaren around this time about a performance by the Pistols at the large central London venue, the Lyceum. Malcolm asked that we keep their identity under wraps, so I went ahead and got the gig, only to receive a call from the bookers cancelling it a couple of days later, says Dexter. They found out that it was the Pistols, and when I asked around, I discovered Malcolm had told them. McLaren began to adopt a visual identity at odds with his position as the ringmaster of the situation, that of the innocent schoolboy. I can never forget wearing a schoolboy's suit with long trousers from John Lewis when I managed the Sex Pistols, wrote McLaren in his notes on the period. In fact, he soon abandoned the grey serge trousers, but kept the matching blazer, which didn't feature a badge on the breast pocket, but still gave a jarring appearance when paired with his leather jeans, bondage boots, and black shirts. People thought it very odd, but I felt very good in those clothes. It made me feel somewhat younger than I was, and somehow enabled me to make the same kind of mistakes that ordinarily you would fear making. By virtue of being seen in something young, you could be young and immature. You could afford to be fearless and naive. I enjoyed that, and those clothes put me in that frame of mind. This outlook was seriously to disadvantage McLaren in business terms. For now, the thrusting Virgin Records entrepreneur Richard Branson had entered the scene. 4 years younger than McLaren, Mr. Pickle, as the Pistols manager derisively named him, in the mistaken belief that he was related to the family which produced a Branson breed of condiments, disguised his sharply honed commercial nous behind a permanent wolfish grin and tousle-haired bearded facade. Branson was just as willing a risk-taker as McLaren, but by far the smarter businessman, and had been touting his freewheeling independent label as a sympathetic home to the group since the EMI debacle, and saw his chance in the wake of the A&M collapse. Like McLaren, Branson was aware of the publicity opportunities the forthcoming Silver Jubilee would afford the Pistols' holdover single from A&M, God Save the Queen. Causing a stir at the epicenter of punk action would help reinvent his company, which had become associated with stodgy progressive rock. Malcolm and Richard were so similar, said one of Branson's people, Al Clark, in the 1980s. In Richard, Malcolm had met his match. He didn't like that. Journalist Peter York put it more succinctly. Clever young Richard Branson, who was a merry prankster, thought, I don't know what this punk thing is about, but there's some money in it. So there you go. Life and Times of Malcolm McLaren, the biography boy, Paul Gorman. Get it in your stocking.